Okay, so here's the deal. If you watched my video yesterday, we talked about levers and keys, and then I mentioned something about the depletion mechanic. And that's like realistically like one of the best solutions for solving levers and keys is like not punishing players as hard for depleting keys by not lowering their dungeon. There's been a little bit of discourse in the WoW community, or the M plus community specifically, over the past couple of days, talking about key depletion, what should happen to your key after you're finishing up a run. And then obviously we've seen some changes with score, but I mean, the score stuff is less related to the topic that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the question of like, should your key be depleted whenever you are finishing up a dungeon? And so we have this great tweet from JB, and he has, key depletion is maybe my least favorite WoW mechanic. It encourages playing like a timid bitch and doing safe stuff firmly in your comfort zone instead of doing cool stuff that scares the shit out of you. So let's talk about the disadvantages of key depletion. So first off, if key depletion is the current way it is, then you run into this issue whenever you are either in the middle of the key after a wipe or at the end of the key where people will leave your group, right? And we talked about levers yesterday. People leave your group and they leave your key effectively abandoned and not able to time it. Then you're, as the key holder, zoning out of the dungeon, and you're getting that exact same key on one key level lower, and the burden is on you to fill the group and rerun that key to try to time it at one key level higher. Obviously, whenever you're pushing keys with a 5-man group, this is more or less fine, but whenever you are doing keys in LFG, this is really, really, really annoying, because you are less in control of like, oh, okay, so we're going to drop the key. And more often than not, if you're doing keys in LFG, you're never going to see those 4 people that you were playing with earlier ever again. And that's just the nature of it. Now, so let's give some perspective on the disadvantages of it, and let's kind of talk about some of the reasons that I think that key depletion is actually a good mechanic, but not exactly for the reasons that everybody would believe. And then we can talk about like my potential solutions. I think that Growl kind of actually says it best here. No pull is scary if the key isn't at risk. So stakes are actually very important, especially once you start pushing like higher keys, making sure that you have some effective risk once you start to get to these levels where the keys are a lot more dangerous and a lot less like gear restricted. Because at some level, the keys are just mostly gear restricted, you know, at like, if you're doing 10s, for example, most of those keys are just gear restricted. And once you are 4 or 5 out of level 4 set, 10s are quite easy for most players, or 415 or whatever. But until then, 10s could actually be fairly challenging. But at the higher end, once you start to get to like, 20, honestly, 20s and beyond, there should be some level of risk inherently to doing the dungeon, and you should have to have some level of execution, and you should kind of be punished for not doing the key in time. JB retorts, it's just like, I might have to do several boring keys after this one. He's talking effectively about the homework key situation, where like if you deplete a key, then you have to do, okay, so say you deplete a key by 1 or 2 seconds, then you have to do 2 keys to be able to get back to that key level that you were about to previously get to that you only missed by 2 seconds. And that is unfortunate, as opposed to having to only rerun back 1 key. That is unfortunate. So for me, I think that the biggest issue, and I commented this here, I think that Tournament Realm style no key depletion mechanics are very dangerous for push groups, because it takes a lot of fun out of the groups. And this comes from the context of like, you end up having to like practice your first pull a lot, and you end up having to practice the very hard part of the dungeon, as opposed to your practice is a little bit more on the fly. You're not able to do the highest level of keys on live, and that's kind of fine. And most of the time, players are fine with that. That's saved for events like the Great Push and stuff like that, where you're not able to actually do the highest level of keys because you're not able to practice like whatever the best route is, or you're not able to practice like the first pull. In addition to that, if you didn't have the key depletion mechanic, you would start to run into a situation where you are going to basically do the largest pull possible, the largest first pull possible that you realistically can. And if it messes up, that's fine. We zone out and we go again. So take Celia's Gambit, for example. You would do like an enormous beach pull. And it's like a beach pull that we saw some of the TGP teams doing. Nobody was ever doing anything close to that on live, but TGP teams, since they had unlimited attempts, were able to do that during that event. Kind of similar situation this season. Let me think of a better example. In Algathar Academy, what's there from stopping you from going left and doing all 3 of the packs in front of Veximus, or all 3 of the packs in front of Veximus plus some worms together over and over and over again until that one time you strike gold and then you're able to complete that key? That's an issue at like the high end whenever you're in coordinated groups and stuff like that. For average players, I actually think that the key depletion mechanic is really, really annoying. But I think that the key depletion mechanic should start at around the 16 level. And so I think that below 16s, keys like at 16 below, keys probably shouldn't deplete. Realistically, there's no reason for you to, like, if somebody messes up and you're at a 16, there's no need for the key to actually go down below a 16 if you've already pushed it up past that level. But once you start to get like, and the reason that I stay away from 20s here, because I think that 20 is the obvious like solution, but I think it's actually not exactly great, because 20s early season are very challenging, and you don't want no depletion for keys early in the season whenever you're trying to push up a 20, because that becomes really, really annoying for basically players who are trying to push 20s early season, because then they will allow people who probably shouldn't be doing 20s the opportunity to get to, the 18s, the 19s, and it's like they're going to spend hours upon hours inside of those keys, and it becomes a less fun experience. It's definitely a situation of like, you think it would maybe be fun to practice the dungeons, but unless you are on a tournament realm or something like that and you really know what you're getting yourself into, it is not fun to practice keys like that. Again, like, just to kind of summarize this a little bit and then just kind of give my thoughts on it. Key depletion, very toxic for players in LFG generally, and honestly, I think it doesn't have a state for players below, like the 16 level. Beyond that, I think that key depletion is actually a very good mechanic, and we've actually had similar systems or situations of M+ where key depletion wasn't the thing. If you guys remember, way back in Legion, there wasn't key depletion. That system was significantly less fun, and then they added keys that depleted or lower their level at the end of runs. This then added some friction where you were doing, 1 to 2 key levels below the maximum, potentially even a little bit more. And it added like the homework key situation, which is not great, but at the same point, with the ability to be able to reroll keys at the end of the dungeon and stuff like that, key depletion, I think, is a healthy mechanic for the game as a whole, because then it adds some structure, and it doesn't allow you, or it doesn't force you to have to practice dungeons over and over and over again. All right, that's going to be it for me today. I hope to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video.